info and chill.
All right, everyone, buckle up. Today, we're going on an adventure, but not the kind you see in travel brochures. We're exploring some of the most dangerous islands on Earth.
Oh, yeah. These aren't your typical paradise islands.
Definitely not. Think venomous creatures, radioactive zones, maybe even some uncontacted tribes. We've got some amazing articles all about these places, and
Well, I've been looking into the why behind these dangers, like what makes these islands so treacherous.
so we've got the what and you got the why. Sounds like a perfect deep dive.
It really is fascinating stuff. The sheer variety of dangers is incredible. We're talking volcanoes, aggressive wildlife, harsh climates.
And then you throw in some, well, let's call it human influence, nuclear testing, bioweapons research, and
And political instability, too. Don't forget that.
right. Like one article mentioned Fraser Island in Australia. Beautiful beaches, but also dingoes, venomous jellyfish, 80 sharks.
Yeah, Fraser Island is a great example of just how dangerous nature can be on its own. But then you've got places like the Farallon Islands off the coast of California.
What's going on there?
Well, they're a breeding ground for great white sharks, which is scary enough. But then humans had to go and make it worse.
How so?
They turned the islands into a dumping ground for radioactive waste. It really makes you think about the long-term consequences of our actions, doesn't it?
No kidding. It makes swimming in the ocean seem a lot less appealing suddenly.
Right.
Okay, but speaking of danger, let's talk about a place where it's not so much about what's in the water, but who's on the land. North Sentinel Island, home to the Sentinelese people, one of the last uncontacted tribes in the world. And from what we've read, they really don't like visitors.
Yeah, and it's likely because of bad experiences they've had with the outside world in the past. Their hostility, while unsettling, is understandable. It poses a real ethical dilemma, Do we respect their isolation even though we know so little about them?
Or try to make contact and risk, well, more conflict, and potentially expose them to diseases they have no immunity to. It's a tough one. The articles mention a couple of incidents where fishermen and even a missionary were killed when they got too close. It's tragic, and it's a stark reminder that sometimes the most dangerous thing about a place is other humans.
Sadly, that's true.
But there's another island that really caught my attention. Ilha da Queimada Grande in Brazil, otherwise known as Snake Island.
Ah, yes, Snake Island. Now, that's a fascinating and terrifying example of how isolation can drive evolution.
Seriously, this place is said to have one venomous golden lancehead viper per square meter. Their venom can melt human flesh.
Oh, it's incredibly potent stuff.
Can you imagine stepping foot on that island? You wouldn't even need a beach towel, just lay down some newspaper.
Well, luckily, the Brazilian government has made it strictly off limits. And you know what's interesting about Snake Island? It's a perfect example of what we call a closed ecosystem.
Closed ecosystem, what does that mean exactly?
It means it's been isolated from the mainland for so long that the snakes have evolved without any natural predators on the ground.
So they had to come up with some creative ways to hunt.
Precisely. Their main prey is birds, so they evolve this super potent venom to take them down quickly before they can fly away. It's evolution in action.
Wow. That's incredible. Okay, so we've got islands with dingoes, radioactive waste, hostile tribes, and flesh-melting snakes. What else could there be?
Oh, there's always more.
Of course there is. Well, how about an island that's basically one giant nuclear test site? Bikini Atoll, part of the Marshall Islands. It looks like paradise, but there's a dark history there.
Oh, yeah. A stark reminder of what human ingenuity can create and the consequences that come with it. The U.S. conducted 67 nuclear tests there between 1946 and 1958.
67? Seriously?
One of those tests, codenamed Castle Bravo, was the largest nuclear weapon ever detonated by the U.S., over 1,000 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima.
Wow, I had no idea.
The fallout from that test contaminated the entire area, making it uninhabitable for decades.
And the effects are still felt today, right?
Absolutely. Bikini Atoll serves as a chilling reminder of just how long-lasting the effects of nuclear testing can be, both on the environment and human health.
It's a real wake-up call about how we treat our planet. Speaking of which, Vozrozhdeniya Island in the Aral Sea has a similar story, but with a biological twist.
Ah, yes. Vozrozhdeniya. Quite a place.
This once lush island became a top-secret Soviet bioweapons testing ground during the Cold War. They tested some of the deadliest pathogens there: anthrax, smallpox, the bubonic plague. It's terrifying.
It's like something out of a nightmare. And what makes it even scarier is that the Aral Sea has shrunk dramatically due to, well, human mismanagement of water resources. And that's connected the island to the mainland.
So what was once isolated is now accessible.
Exactly. And that raises a whole new set of concerns about the potential for those deadly pathogens to spread. Valdroždenia Island is a stark warning about how our actions can have unintended and potentially catastrophic consequences.
It's a chilling thought, for sure, but one we definitely need to keep in mind. It's mind-blowing how we can take these places that look like paradise and turn them into, well, nightmares. And speaking of nightmares, did you know there's an island that was basically a giant petri dish for anthrax?
Oh, yes. Greenard Island, off the coast of Scotland. Back in World War II, the British government decided to test how effective anthrax would be as a biological weapon.
And how did that go?
Well, let's just say the tests were successful, maybe a little too successful. They contaminated the island so badly, it was deemed too dangerous to even go near for almost 50 years.
Wow. So what happened? Did they just leave it alone?
They tried to decontaminate it in the 1980s, but there are still concerns about, lingering anthrax spores. It really shows how long-lasting the impact of our decisions can be, especially when we're dealing with something as potent as anthrax.
Absolutely. It makes you think twice about messing with Mother Nature, doesn't it? Okay, well, let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about biological warfare, but what about political instability? Bougainville Island in Papua New Guinea has a long history of conflict and unrest. Makes it a pretty unpredictable place, to say the least.
Right, and what makes Bougainville unique is that the danger isn't just from potential conflict. The island's terrain is incredibly challenging too, with dense jungles and those unpredictable rivers. Even experienced adventurers had to be super careful there.
It's a good reminder that danger doesn't always come in the form of, deadly creatures or toxic substances. Sometimes it's the human element, the political situations that create the biggest risks. Okay, but I gotta mention a couple more fascinating islands, ones that are both beautiful and dangerous. Heard Island, a remote Australian territory way down in the Southern Ocean. Glaciers, an active volcano, some of the harshest weather on Earth.
Scientists actually describe Heard Island as a fascinating place, geologically, biologically, chemically, and physically, which, if you ask me, translates to dangerously awesome.
Uh-huh, yeah, I like that. And then there's Skellig Michael off the coast of Ireland, famous for its ancient monastery, perched right on a rocky crag. It was even in those recent Star Wars films.
Oh yeah, the views are amazing, but getting to that monastery is a whole other story. Boat trip across rough seas, then a climb up hundreds of steep, uneven steps. Definitely not for the faint of heart.
So we've got islands ravaged by nuclear testing, islands teeming with venomous snakes, islands harboring deadly pathogens, and islands where the journey itself is a challenge. It's like these islands are daring us to test our limits, confront the raw power of nature, and maybe face our own vulnerability.
I think there's also a lesson here about the balance between exploration and preservation. We're drawn to these places for their beauty and mystery, but we have a responsibility to protect them, not just for future generations, but for the sake of the ecosystems they support.
Absolutely. It's a delicate balance, for sure. Okay, let's talk about Saba Island in the Caribbean. Looks like a tropical paradise on the surface. Lush greenery, stunning volcanic peaks. But there's a catch.
A fiery one. Saba Island sits right on top of an active volcano, Mount Scenery, a good reminder that danger can lurk beneath even the most idyllic settings.
And just to up the ante, Saba Island's also right in the path of hurricanes. It's like Mother Nature threw everything she had at this island.
Talk about a challenge. It's a testament to the resilience of those islanders who call Saba home. They've learned to live with the constant threat of eruptions and hurricanes.
That's amazing. It really shows how what we perceive as dangerous can be a way of life for others. And speaking of terrifying, let's head over to Ramri Island in Myanmar. This island has a dark history that gives me chills just thinking about it.
Ramri Island is infamous for its saltwater crocodiles. You live in those vast mangrove swamps, and during World War II, hundreds of Japanese soldiers retreating through those swamps were attacked and killed by these massive predators.
Oh, wow. It sounds like something out of a horror movie.
And those swamps are still considered one of the most dangerous crocodile habitats in the world. It's a good reminder that sometimes the most dangerous predators aren't the ones we create, but the ones that have been around for millions of years, perfectly adapted to their environments.
Well, from flesh-melting snakes to man-eating crocodiles, we've covered a lot of dangerous creatures. But there's one more danger we haven't talked about, something we all need to survive. Air.
Oh, that's right.
Miyakijima, a volcanic island in Japan, is notorious for its toxic air. The volcano there, Mount Oyama, constantly spews out sulfur dioxide gas. Makes it a pretty challenging place to live.
Can you imagine having to carry a gas mask everywhere you go just
Right.
to breathe? That's everyday life for the people on Miyake-jima. They've adapted, but it really makes you appreciate clean air, doesn't it?
It really does. It's incredible how humans can adapt to even the most extreme environments, but it also highlights how important it is to understand those delicate ecosystems and how our actions affect them. A lot of these dangers, from nuclear fallout to toxic air, are a direct result of what we've done.
Very true. It's definitely a sobering thought.
It is, but maybe it's also a call to action, you know? By understanding these risks, both natural and man-made, we can work to protect these incredible places and make sure they're around for future generations.
I agree. We have a responsibility to care for our planet, even the most dangerous corners of it.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, haven't we? From venomous snakes to radioactive remnants, hostile tribes to political unrest. Danger comes in so many forms.
It really does. And as we've explored these islands, I think it's important to remember that the line between adventure and recklessness is often very thin.
So true. We're drawn to the unknown, to those thrilling places, but we need to approach them with respect and preparation and a real understanding of the risks.
And a commitment to responsible travel.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's time to address the question that's been on my mind this whole time. Are any of these dangerous islands actually worth visiting? All right, so we've explored these dangerous islands, these incredible but risky places. But the big question is, are any of them worth visiting? I mean, we've talked about radioactive atolls, islands overrun with venomous snakes, places where the air itself is toxic.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, is the risk ever worth the reward?
It really gets to the heart of how we see nature, doesn't it? That pull to explore, to see something truly unique, but also the need to be safe and protect ourselves in these fragile environments.
Exactly. Like Bikini Atoll, right? It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, incredible diving in those crystal clear waters. But there's also that legacy of nuclear testing. How do you weigh those two things?
Well, radiation levels at Bikini Atoll have gone down a lot over time. There are organized tours, they carefully monitor radiation exposure, take steps to minimize risks. It's not a decision to be made lightly, but some people might feel that experiencing such a historically and ecologically significant place outweighs the potential risks.
So it comes down to informed choices, really. Knowing the risks and deciding what you're comfortable with. What about a place like Wakari, that active volcano in New Zealand? Awe-inspiring, but also unpredictable.
Wakarari really shows how we can respect the power of nature while still appreciating its beauty. After that tragic eruption in 2019, access is heavily restricted. You can still take boat tours, though, get those amazing views from a safe distance.
Finding that balance, huh? Satisfying our curiosity while acknowledging that some places are best admired from afar. What about islands where the danger comes from the wildlife, like Fraser Island with those dingoes, or Komodo Island, home of the Komodo dragons?
In those cases, responsible tourism is key. On Fraser Island, they've got strict guidelines about interacting with dingoes. Storing food properly, not feeding them, that kind of thing, really reduces the risk of any bad encounters. And on Komodo Island, guided tours make sure visitors can observe these amazing creatures safely, protecting both humans and the dragons.
Right, we're the ones entering their habitat. We need to be respectful guests. Okay, so we've covered radiation, volcanoes, wildlife. What about those places where the journey itself is the danger? Like Skellig Michael, with those steep, ancient steps leading up to the monastery.
Skellig Michael reminds us that beauty can be hard to reach. Those steps carved into the rock centuries ago, definitely not for everyone. But for those who are fit and prepared for the climb, it's a truly unique experience, full of history and natural wonder.
Like those islands are testing us, pushing us to our limits physically and mentally.
I think you're onto something there. There's always an element of risk in any exploration, whether it's climbing a mountain, sailing across an ocean, or even just stepping outside our comfort zone. But it's that risk, that sense of the unknown that makes the experience so rewarding.
So, after all this, are dangerous islands worth visiting? I guess it depends. It depends on the island, the level of risk, and how much you're personally willing to adventure. But one thing's for sure. Approaching these places with respect, with preparation, and with a willingness to learn from both the beauty and the danger, that's essential.
Couldn't agree more. Finding that sweet spot, satisfying our curiosity while making sure these incredible places are still around for future generations.
Well, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into the world's most dangerous islands. A journey full of fascinating insights, some adrenaline-pumping moments, and maybe a new appreciation for the power and fragility of our planet.
It's been great exploring these islands with you. And remember, the world is full of amazing places, each with its own beauty and its own challenges. So keep exploring, keep learning, and most importantly, keep adventuring responsibly.
Until next time, stay curious and stay safe out there.